finds out why. Global Village meets up with the makers of Tomb Raider star Lara Croft at 7:30. But first, Will Hanrahan investigates what's made Acorn turn to digital TV in Blue Chip.
Hello, I'm Will Hanrahan. Welcome indeed to Blue Chip, your inside guide to the computer industry. And coming up in today's programme, a complete makeover for the UK's most famous computer maker as it all but quits the education and desktop markets after 20 years. Out goes Acorn and in comes a new name, Element 14. Also tonight, Peter Cowan and his team tackle your business IT problems in Troubleshooter. Welcome indeed. The death knell has been sounded for the UK's most famous computer brand. Veteran technology company Acorn has announced radical restructuring and the end of the line for the once successful brand of Acorn Computers. Helen Rothwell reports on the changes at the historic company responsible for several important innovations.
Acorn began life here in the heart of Cambridge just over 20 years ago. The company has a history linked to the university's leading computer scientists. Over the years, it has spawned cutting-edge innovations in microprocessors, operating systems and other software systems. It relied on its technological expertise, plus some big doses of good fortune along the way. Unlike today's startups, Acorn didn't need to do much to market itself, because within 2 years the company was launched into the education market thanks to a major order from the BBC. The first computer to be purchased by many British schools, the BBC Micro used a TV screen rather than a computer monitor, making it affordable and easy to use.
The effect of the BBC was very instant indeed. We had 400 dealers in the early 80s, and demand was so high for the BBC that dealers often found people queuing just to get their hands on the BBC computer.
There's no archive at the company devoted to its history, just a series of motherboards of machines produced over the years. The Electron, the first of the company's non-BBC branded computers, was to follow. In the late 80s, another computer, the Archimedes, helped to continue the company's dominance of the education market. But it failed to appeal to home consumers, as the BBC machines had done. One of Acorn's biggest contributions to computing is the RISC, or Restricted Instruction Set chip.
The RISC processor has a number of major advantages over the alternatives. Not least, it has a lot of bangs for the amount of watts that go in. And that means that you can run a digital interactive TV set-top box without the need for large and noisy fans, etc., which again sync up and use up more power.
Acorn has always been proud of its operating system software. There's a rumour that Bill Gates visited Acorn's founders in their early days and asked them to support a joint venture based on DOS. Co-founder Herman Hauser is reported to have turned him down on the grounds that Acorn's operating system was superior. As a direct result of Acorn's very rapid growth, financial troubles struck as early as the mid-1980s. This led to an 80% share purchase by Olivetti, but little direct involvement. Later, Acorn not only failed to crack the US market, but lost a lot of money, which prompted Olivetti to give active direction for a time. At about the same time, new opportunities arose. Acorn was to pioneer the first network computer after a chance meeting with Oracle directors in America. The Acorn NC runs on the RISC operating system and Java, taking applications from a central server. It's economical to buy and to run. However, although it is used in various businesses and schools, the network computer has not been a great money spinner. Another pioneering step was a partnership involving the BBC, BT and various local firms in an interactive digital TV trial in Cambridge.
By the mid-1990s, Acorn had identified it had skills in the area of digital ITV. We had the ability to put computer graphics onto television sets, which came around because of our history in the educational market. We used that skill along with a number of other local companies here as well. We identified that we could do it, and in so doing we were the first in the world to put on an ATM end-to-end digital interactive TV trial.
Perhaps the greatest and most profitable contribution from Acorn is the family of advanced RISC machine chips manufactured by ARM, in which Acorn has a 25% stake. Acorn's shares in ARM are now worth £110 million. That is worth more than the value of Acorn. Acorn has not made an operating profit since 1993, partly because of falling computer prices and sales. This led to a drastic rethink and a boardroom reshuffle from which former finance director Stan Boland emerged as chief executive. Then, a decision was taken just before the traditional Acorn show to cancel the event and to cancel the Phoebe computer, an advanced RISC operating system desktop computer. Here stands the colourful but forlorn Phoebe, never to be released. To the shock of its traditional client groups, schools, dealers, software developers and user groups, a series of decisions made over the past year shows the company reinventing itself to address the growing digital television market to an almost exclusive degree. Recently, orders have been won for 10,000 digital set-top boxes for a Canadian rollout of interactive TV. In Bristol, a group of 7 specialist silicon designers have been taken on. New sales offices have opened in San Jose and elsewhere. And most recently, there's been a controversial name change from Acorn to Element 14.
The important thing for us as Element 14 is that the client-end device that's required to sit underneath a television is not a dumb decoder. With respect to all of the products that are out there today, a box that sits connected to either a dish or an aerial on the roof is no way complex enough to be able to handle the true digital interactive TV services of the future.
So, as Acorn slips into the night, many will be wondering, will the new company make its way as successfully into new markets and into people's hearts as Acorn did? This is Helen Rothwell reporting for Blue Chip.
And thank you to Helen. Now, Stan Boland, who you saw in that report, Chief Executive Officer of Element 14, and Neil Spellings, Chairman of the Association of Acorn User Groups. They join me now. Thanks very much to them. Well, fascinating report, fascinating what's happened, really. Drastic action, I'd say, Stan. Certainly seems drastic to me. Why these sudden decisions?
Well, I'm not sure they are that sudden, really. I think Acorn has been diversifying away from desktop computers really since the mid-90s. And I think what we had was a business that was part invested in lots of markets and not sufficiently invested in any single one. So what we've decided to do is really focus all of our attention and effort in the digital TV market. And to do that, we really need to step out of some of the other markets.
But when you step out of some of those other markets, you're leaving behind a very loyal Acorn community involved in desktop computers. Isn't that leaving them rather high and dry?
Well, no, not really, because we still continue to supply computers to that market. What we've really said is that we're not really willing to invest any more money in developing next-generation desktop computers. The key thing that people are invested into on a personal basis is the operating system. And the operating system we will retain. In fact, we plan to issue a new release of the operating system in the near future.
OK, I mean, that's crucial, isn't it? I mean, there are schools up and down the UK who are still devoted to their Acorns, and it would be a great shame if you suddenly lost that market. But let's get this clear. Are you or aren't you going to be in the desktop market in the future?
Well, I think...
I mean, you've talked about being slightly spread, and you're saying, well, we're not going to be spread, we're going to be very focused, but at the same time, we don't want to leave our old clients.
And it's obviously a difficult balance that we're trying to strike here. What we've said is that in terms of our investment dollars are going into digital TV. Does that mean that we need to exit the desktop market today? No, it doesn't. It means that we can continue to supply computers to that marketplace as long as there's a market for them. I mean, the reality is the market's declining very, very quickly.
And how important is that market to you at the moment, as desktop?
Well, in financial terms, it's not very important at all. The total amount of revenue that we do in that market is very small indeed.
Compared to the overall revenue of the company?
Compared to the overall revenue of the company.
So, whilst you're not jettisoning them, I'm relieved to hear that. The Acorn community will still get a service from you, but to be fair I think it would be fair to say that you're withering on the vine, that sort of section of the market. As they choose other operating systems in the future, you'll say goodbye to them. You'll try and keep them on.
And I think it's true. It's in a sense, obviously, it's very sad that here is a company that was a passionately held entity, something people clutched to their chest, I guess, throughout the 80s and into the 90s. The fact is that there aren't enough people out there who are willing to buy Acorn's operating system.
Yeah, but they're awfully keen on you. I mean, we still get email here telling me off, constantly saying PC or Apple, and they said, what about Acorns? Look, I want to talk to you about your new business later on, but let's bring Neil in at this stage. And what about you, Neil? How did you react, and people like you react, at the cancellation of the show as much as anything? That was quite a shock, and indeed the cancellation of Phoebe.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge shock, really. I mean, everyone was on quite a high at the time, building up to the show, which was a couple of months. Phoebe was just about to go into production. Everyone was looking forward to receiving that. I mean, it had been like 2 years in development, and the fact that suddenly it all came to an end, it was a huge shock. Yeah.
What is your reaction immediately to what Stan has said? I mean, he said, look, we're looking to the future and our investment dollars aren't going to be in desktop computing.
Yeah, I mean, we can see that from the recent name change. I mean, I think it's clear to see that Acorn really, or Element 14 now, have sort of really pulled out of the workstation business. They may continue to produce workstations if there's the money.
Tell me about the Acorn community that has remained loyal to Acorn. What sort of community is it? Who's in it?
Obviously, you've got all the schools have invested heavily in Acorn equipment over the past 10, 15 years. There's sort of quite a good enthusiast base as well, who would like to be on sort of cutting edge of technology, especially with the operating system.
And how will they react to this news?
Well, there's anger, there's shock. There's also a very good sense of community, and everyone sort of pulled together and said, well, we're not going to let the platform die, regardless of what's been announced.
Now, what will that mean? Are you going to invent the Acorn user group operating community and keep upgrading it yourself?
Well, I mean, the dealers and developers share the views of the users in the fact that it's a very good operating system, it's a very good platform, and it shouldn't come to an end. And again, there's been talks of various rescue packages and things like that to continue the brand.
Rescue package for what, Stan? Do you need rescuing, Stan?
Well, I think a rescuing package for the OS, I think, to actually make sure it continues to be supported and available to the whole marketplace.
And so is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, yeah.
OK, we'll talk more about that too later. For the moment, chaps, I'd like to say thanks, but don't go far. OK, let's bring this discussion to a halt for the moment and to ponder this question of name changes. It's not that uncommon. In fact, we did a little digging into name changing, and here's what we found. Now, Unisys, the big computer server and services company, traded under the rather less cutting-edge name of Burroughs until 1986, when it decided to change direction and change names too. The mighty Big Blue, even they have gone through a name change in their time, and it did them no harm. They were, until 1924, known as the Computer Tabulating Recording Company, when it suddenly dawned on someone what a mouthful that was. And then there's Fujitsu, the company that bought ICL and renamed some of its hardware and operations. Rumour has it that they don't think it was such a good idea after all to change their name. Now, I'm joined by Ian Burley. Now, Ian is an IT commentator. Stan is staying with me, the CEO of Element 14, formerly known as Acorn. Let's start with you, Ian. Name changes. What do you think of Acorn changing its name?
Well, it's an obvious thing to do, and I'm not surprised that they're doing it, because they are moving into a new market. So, yes, it's an obvious thing to do, and it's quite a clever way to do it.
But what about the choice of name? Element 14. When I first read Element 14, I thought it was a new boys' group from the East End of London, I must say, rather like East 17. Do you think it sounds good, Element 14?
It does sound good. I'm not sure about E14. It sounds a bit like an additive, food additive. But the reasoning behind the name is actually very good. It's the 14th atomic symbol, which means silicon, which is very close to Stan's heart, I think. OK, well, of course, we all knew that. Let's bring you in at Stan at this stage. Why the name change? Why not just perhaps an alteration, something like Acorn Interactive, Acorn Very Busy, Acorn Moving, or whatever?
Yeah, I think Acorn's well known in the UK, mainly as an educational PC company. It's got no brand values outside that currently in the UK market. I think if you look outside the UK in Silicon Valley, it's probably known for one thing, which is the deal it did in 1996 with Oracle to create the NC, and in fact that deal collapsed about a year later. So it's kind of seen as the company that started to do something with a major player and then had to stop for reasons that are not obvious to people. And actually shifting brand value is actually quite a difficult thing to do.
So, from an international point of view, it's doing you no harm at all to jettison Acorn. It's only in the UK that you're known as Acorn, and in the UK where you're known as Acorn, you're known for something that you don't particularly want to concentrate in the future, so it's as good a time as any to change your name.
It's a very good time to change the name.
OK, my element 14, is it all down to this extremely superbly put explanation from Ian?
Well, I think Ian's hit you on the nail, really, which is that we wanted something that was pretty fundamental, that had some high standout value. And silicon is the 14th element in the periodic table. Silicon is the basic building block of digital technology. And much of what we're doing is basically pushing the company into the silicon and low-level software area and away from the desktop computer area. So it actually fits extremely well what the company's going to be doing in the future.
OK, but in a nutshell, from a global point of view, you're actually selling a new brand, so why not have a new name? By the way, who came up with the idea of Element 14?
Well, it was from our branding agency, and we got a list of, well, we had probably about 100 names to choose from, and we honed it down to about 10.
Okay.
Put it into.
Can you think of one of the more outlandish ones? Just give me an example of just what you did reject. Or is that being too unfair?
Well, we were talking about doing some similar stuff to a company called Wind River Systems, and our branding agency said, how about Babbling Brook? We decided not to go with that one.
I tell you, Babbling Brook sounds like a failed boys band, so I think you've done well with Element 14. Stay with us. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
It's all about, we have time for, in fact, in this part of the programme. But coming up in part 2, we continue our look back at Acorn's legacy and weigh up what the future holds in store for the new company, the superbly named Element 14. And coming up later tonight, Peter Kerwin and his troubleshooter team deal with your business IT problems.
Sky Digital is leading television into the new millennium, and we want you to be part of it. Call 0870 2420.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Will Hanrahan. This is Blue Chip. Still to come on today's programme, Peter Kerwin and his team answer a range of your business IT problems in Troubleshooter. That's an answer to look forward to. But first, Stan Boland and Ian Burley are still with me to discuss Acorn's legacy and indeed its new identity as Element 14. Stan, back to you first. Acorn. I mean, a successful brand, actually, in the past, I think it would be fair to say, in one respect, in as much as it did get a market, it penetrated a market, but it's been dogged with financial troubles for years, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, since '93, we've not made a profit in the company. I've been with the company about 15 months, and if I look back at the last 4 years, it's sort of year after year of basically declining revenues and continuing losses.
Why?
Well, I think the desktop market is just not big enough, really, for the company. We've got some very, very clever people that on a world stage you can put in front of the best semiconductor companies or the best system companies, and they can basically hold their own. In fact, stand up there ahead of other people. So these are not necessarily cheap people. Very clever, but we're not targeting their talents in an area where we can make a lot of money.
So you had the intellect to match anybody in the world, but that intellect was a little unguided when it came to the major profit margins.
Yeah, and it's not unusual. If you look at the desktop market, it is essentially a Microsoft market today, and unless you're Microsoft, it's very hard to make money.
I must say, it almost begs the question, why have you taken so long, or why has Acorn taken so long to admit the obvious?
I think it's very hard for companies to go through significant change because it does require old things to be stopped and new things to be started. And stopping old things at a time when they're actually contributing something to the bottom line is actually very hard. It's been a hard process just in the last 6 months of last year as we put the company through the changes that it had to be. I mean, I for instance, got death threats from the Acorn community. Because of the changes that we put the company through.
It's good that you can smile about it. I mean, I must say I'd have been slightly worried about it. Look, in a nutshell, how would you define your core market of the future before I ask Ian whether he thinks you're going to succeed?
Right, it's going to be in creating silicon and software intellectual property for the digital TV and, in fact, the broader multimedia market. I guess we come from a perspective that streamed media data is going to touch the lives of most consumers on the planet over the next 10 years. And that requires very high performance, low cost semiconductors and software.
Semiconductors, hardware?
Semiconductor silicon chips.
Okay.
So in a sense hardware, yeah.
So in a very small sense hardware, but you're still software driven in that respect, and you're serving something which one hopes is going to have a big demand in the future digital TV.
That's right, but I think the key thing is it's an intellectual property offer is what we're creating. So whether intellectual property is in the form of software or is in the form of a software that creates silicon chips is kind of irrelevant, really.
Now, all that talent that you had, that intellectual talent that we talked about that wasn't necessarily profit-orientated, have they gone?
No, I don't think so. No, we've been very careful to retain through the transition that we've made all the key contributors to the business in the future. And in fact, we just recently added to them with hiring a team of 7 people in Bristol to create a new design team.
Okay, they're keeping the brains, they're refocusing on the future, completely different market, or a new market anyway. What do you think? Have they a chance?
Well, I have to say they have, in a way, tried this once before with the online media venture, which was a subsidiary which tackled a related market. It was too early. It was a bit before its time, and that failed. Some of that technology was reused, and we come up to the present day. I think that they're in danger of being a little bit too late for the market. The digital TV market has taken off.
Has it? I see a lot of adverts, but has it taken off?
Well, it's started to take off, and that means that the hardware has been in place for, in some cases, years now. People like Pace and other manufacturers, Nokia, etc., have finished their hardware designs for the current. But
this isn't necessarily a hardware competition, is it?
No, what we're looking to is the growth in embedded multimedia processors over the course of the next 5 years. And if we look at the projections, by 2005 there'll be 280 million embedded microprocessors in devices sold per annum. And what we're looking to do is to target a proportion of that market.
And who are his main competitors in that?
Well, Acorn's technology is based around software which drives the silicon. Other manufacturers like VLSI, who are indeed a former partner of Acorn, are addressing the hardware in a different way, and they're using customized hardware to be the key to the product rather than driving it through software.
But in a nutshell, you think they're a tad late. Having been early in the past, they're a tad late. Now, will that mean it won't work at all, or will it mean it just won't be one of the global players?
Well, they're not too late in the sense that the market is very small and will grow hugely in the future. But the established long-term players are much bigger than Acorn. They don't have such innovative products, but they have the market clout, and that they have the ability to drive the cost down of their not-so-adventurous hardware.
Okay, Stan, straightforward reaction to that. It's not the healthiest of predictions that I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure Ian's been fully briefed or in terms of what it is we're going to be doing.
You've got to educate him.
Because really what we're going to be doing is creating intellectual property that semiconductor companies will embed into system chips. And the market for that is wide open. I guess what's happening in the semiconductor industry is that the geometries on which chips are being made is reducing every single year. That means the cost of silicon is actually not very important. What's very important is the cost of designing the silicon. So what's called the NREs, the non-recurring expenses, is the most important element of a chip. And what that does is it drives people towards programmable solutions where you can use a general purpose silicon architecture and flavour it in software, characterise it in software for different applications. So what Acorn is going to, Element 14 is going to be doing in the near future is actually creating programmable media processor devices for next generation multimedia.
And you're protecting them too. That's the point as well, isn't it? You're protecting them for the commercial advantage of it.
That's right.
Okay, look, I think this has been one of the more fascinating discussions we've had on Blue Chip. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.